with Paradise Health Clinic. So we're gonna get started here. Our presentation is going to be brought to us by Thomas and Lily Kambadzi, who are married with two beautiful boys. And Thomas is a registered nurse and has experienced a lot clinically in terms of mental wellness. And so both of them are going to talk to us about how to maximize our mental wellness. And so without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Thomas and Lily Kambadzi.
Thank you, Sherman, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Awesome. I see some smiles. I initially thought of doing this alone, but then I then invited my wife for us to do it together because I think it's much more real when I'm not just speaking from like a clinical perspective, but we're speaking from like what actually happens when we're at home, when we're trying to practice these things. Not trying, when we're actually practicing these things that we're going to be presenting today. And so, want to say anything? Yeah. You good? Okay, sounds good. We're going to be very conversational, so feel free to say anything. If you ask a question, it's not a trick question. Feel free to just say what you're thinking. So today we're going to be presenting on maximizing your mental wellness. And the first thing that we're just going to look into is definition, so that going forward we're speaking the same language, we're referring to the same thing. So there are some definitions for mental wellness in comparison to like what we typically think about mental health. So mental wellness is a state of overall being where a person can manage stress, build resilience, and function effectively in daily life. And when we typically talk about mental health, we're talking about a person's psychological, emotional, and cognitive state, including the presence or absence of mental disorders. And what I like about this table, which contrasts mental health and mental wellness, is that mental wellness, unlike when you typically think about or talk about mental health, it has a more of a proactive approach in terms of like improving the quality of your life. Whereas sometimes by the time we're talking about mental health, it's more like reactive. There's something already going on that we need help with. And I'd love to encourage us to be more proactive in our mental health. A lot of the times we are very proactive in our physical health, in doing all the things that are necessary to lower our risk for things like cancer, diabetes, and stuff like that. But we tend to not have the same approach when it comes to mental wellness. And so, go ahead.
Sure. Okay, so the first thing when it comes to maximizing your mental wellness, we talk about self-care. It is intentional actions to maintain and improve physical, mental, and emotional being. So first, we're talking about yourself as a you. What can you do for you to maximize your mental wellness?
Next slide.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
So we talk about rest. What can you say about rest?
Sure. So when you talk about rest, like if you're not resting, so rest is many aspects, right? So let's just start within the day. It's important to get about 6 to 8 hours of rest. When you're not fully rested, you're surviving on coffee and stuff like that, you're gonna be very irritable. And when you're irritable, when everyone else, the world is against you, everyone else is just stepping on your toes, you're not really gonna have a good day. So rest is super important. Another aspect of rest is not just like on a daily spectrum, but on a weekly spectrum. It's important to not just be working without taking a rest. So, I don't know if Sherman mentioned this, but for those who got the email, right, I just thought to just drop in right now. When this workshop was advertised, it was advertised as maximizing your mental wellness using principles from the Bible. And so one of the principles from the Bible about rest is there is something called a weekly Sabbath, whereby you actually take a rest once a week, every week. And, even with things like medications, let me not go over there. But there are a lot of, I'll just go over there a little bit. Sometimes, even with your body, when you take a little bit of a rest with medication, and then you take it again, it's more effective than when you're taking it continuously all the time. And so that's why you see, let's say someone is on sleep medication, right? And after a while, they're like, oh, it's doing nothing for me anymore. But if once in a while that person takes a break and taking that medication, then they take it back again, it has more effectiveness than when there's no rest. So rest is a big deal in mental health. And then we're going to talk about the next one, which is
Talking about rest, for example, myself, I normally survive on less hours of sleep, and I'm irritated a lot because I have 2 kids. They're both under 2, and every time I wake up, I just don't want to, do anything because I'm irritated and I need to take care of them. They have different sleep patterns, and sometimes it's really difficult to go about your day. So rest is really important, and you really need to sleep well, rest well, and you will really function when it comes to your day. So the next one is a plant-based diet and water. Yes.
So are we allowed to ask questions?
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay. If you could give advice to those, I know it happens to me often, is you're trying to sleep, you're in this state where you're in your bed it's nighttime, trying to go to sleep, but your brain does not turn off. It's constantly with the problems of life, whatever you're going through at the time that didn't get solved, that has to be solved, and most of the time, these problems you do not know a solution to, hence the amount of stress it causes. So you're supposed to rest, but your brain just does not cooperate. So you're tossing and turning, and then you look at the time, it's 2 a.m, and now you're stressed about that too.
Yeah.
I've lost 4 hours of sleep. Right? So in such a situation, what would you recommend as to help to be able to actually be at peace with one's mind, accept the problems, and go to sleep?
Better go ahead, or should I go first?
Isn't it?
Yeah,
but you can.
but
you can
I'll
answer.
answer it within the context of self-care.
Yeah, sure.
So there are 2 aspects of it. There's like when you're struggling to actually even get to sleep, then there's an aspect of like when you wake up in the middle of the night and you're having trouble with your thoughts and you can't get back to sleep. So I think with the first one, where you actually cannot get to sleep, sometimes it can be a good thing to actually just come out of bed, do something else. Like, maybe go take a warm bath, put some lavender, something which has a sedative effect. So maybe some chamomile tea, dim down the lights, read a book. Having a winding down bed routine also helps. Refraining from screens at least an hour before bed, and just finding. These are just examples, but you eventually find like what works with you. For me, like taking a warm bath really helps a lot when my mind is racing like that. Taking a warm bath. Then the other aspect is if you are experiencing that when you wake up during the night, especially with anxiety. There was a time where I was in a very similar situation where I'd wake up and all I'm thinking about how little money I have to the big bills I have. How there's a mismatch in the two. And one of the things which I have found is praying, like being able to, there's something that happens when you trust in a higher power and you trust that like there's a higher being with in as much as you might not fully understand who the higher being is or you might have questions about a higher being, being able to just lay your trust upon Him, actually as an effect of being peace. There's a Bible verse which says, "Great peace have they whose mind is stayed upon Thee," and Thee referring to God. So that's another thing that I would like to encourage people to have. Like prayer, literally, if you really boil it down, is having conversation with God, and conversation within a context of a trust relationship. Anything else?
Thank you.
Alright. Is it answered?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Nothing else input? I could relate to that question. Also sometimes a late supper or a heavy meal before bedtime. That would really disrupt sleep.
Oh yeah,
You know, you mentioned the screen and other factors.
that's right.
But somehow when we are known that the late suppers are this because of the activity of the world and their working condition. But
Yeah.
usually a very undigested food, even from previous, could affect also our sleeping pattern. Because when the stomach is supposed to rest, it has to work, you know,
That's
while we
very,
are resting.
very true. And I like how you brought this point. It's actually a segue into the next point, which is when you talk about a plant-based diet. It's not just about a plant-based diet. It's also about when you are consuming the diet. And I have so many funny stories. Like when I have taken a late supper, it does have an effect upon your sleep, a negative effect upon your sleep.
Yeah, and he talks during his sleep, he kicks me.
Well, every time I do have a late supper, I'm fighting snakes.
Oh, God.
And the unfortunate part is my
Horrors.
wife ends up
Horror dreams.
getting kicked. So and sometimes I'm talking in my sleep and I'm making sense. And my wife has a habit of recording me.
Yeah,
Because I used to talk and I'm like, when she wakes up and he tells me I was saying, I'm like, no, you're just making this up. Next time I'm talking, you need to record so we have evidence. So that's very true. It's also important the time that you have your last meal of the day. It's more ideal if your last meal is at least 4 hours from your bedtime. Should I continue?
Yeah.
Plant-based diet?
Sure.
So another thing about a plant-based diet, unlike processed foods and animal-based products, is that it really, from a chemical perspective, is really building the foundation for your brain to be experiencing that optimum mental wellness. So, for example, when you think about whole grains, they have something called tryptophan. And tryptophan, for the doctors who are in the room, they can help me out in case I'm tripping. But it's a building block for serotonin. And serotonin is really good for your mental health. When serotonin is depreciating in your brain neurochemistry, that's when you could be diagnosed with things like depression and the like. And also water, when you don't drink water, you're gonna be very irritable. You're gonna be very snappy. You're not gonna have full mental wellness. And my wife knows this from experience when I'm not drinking very much water. And there's someone who made a really good example of like the importance of drinking water. A very good illustration. He said like, if you think about your brain, think about a hallway which only one person can pass at a time. And so that one person is your red blood cells, right? But when you're dehydrated, your red blood cells end up clumping up into groups. So you have like groups of like 10 people trying to pass through a hallway which only one person can pass. And they end up like getting clogged up in the hallway. And that's why you end up like not thinking straight, getting very irritable, getting very frustrated. And so if you're going through your day and you start to feel a little bit foggy, very irritated, very snappy, maybe it's time to drink some water.
Sure.
And another way to figure out whether you're drinking enough water or not is just like checking the color of your pee. If it's yellow, you need more water. If it's more colorless, you're in the good zone. Go on to the next one.
Exercising?
Yeah.
Yeah. Exercising is crucial too. I'll speak for myself. haven't been exercising a lot, and I wake up tired, no strength at all. And you're irritated at all because when you don't have strength, when you can't do anything, you're just there laying idle. So it's actually really good for your mental wellness because when you start exercising, what happens to your body?
Oh, when you start exercising, your body releases endorphins, which are like feel good hormones. So unlike the alternative of taking like opiates and drugs and fentanyl and stuff like that, you could take what God has created for us, which is endorphins through exercise.
Hobbies like singing. I love singing. I remember growing up, we used to sing in the house, and my mom would be like, "You're too noisy." Me and my little sister would shout and everything. It was actually good because it releases this love hormone. What is it called? Yes, that. It's a beautiful hormone, right?
Mm-hmm. Then the other thing is eliminating or swapping vices with hobbies. It's super important. So what happens a lot of times, like when we're stressed or have had a bad day, and we're appreciating, we're seeking towards a better mental state, what tends to happen if you're not very intentional about it, you will default to vices. Whether it be binge watching things, whether it be alcohol, cigarettes, whether it be whatever you name it. It's very important to be very intentional, to be proactive about having hobbies, so that like when you're in a place where you need to just decompress, go to your hobby, and already know what your hobby is before the situation occurs. Hobby. Sorry, pardon my pronunciation. HOWBY. So, like for example, we used to live close to, we lived in Wasaga Beach. We used to live, what's that thing called? So there is this park where there's an automatic this thing which shoots out baseballs, and you have a baseball bat and you beat them up. Anytime I had a bad day, that's where I would go to. I'd go and release the stress on those baseball balls, and it worked. Unlike maybe if I would come home and maybe choose to drink alcohol, it's not really good on your health, but it really doesn't really help like release the stress in a healthy way. But the other thing about vices is that when you use vices to deal with like stressful situations, what's really happening is you're numbing the situation. You're not really confronting it. So I noticed in my practice, I work in a jail. A lot of have a lot of patients who are struggling with addiction. A lot of the times, like fentanyl, crack cocaine. There have been people a lot of times who have been doing crack cocaine for like years. They can't even remember the last time they were sober. But when they get in jail, now they're on forced rehab, right? They have no access to drugs, and they're like, my thoughts are racing so much, I can't even keep pace with them, and they can't sleep. And the reason is they've had like 15 years or 10 years of numbing the problems in their lives, and finally, all of a sudden, you can imagine on all of those problems are released all at once. It's like that's why they can't keep pace with their thoughts. So it's important to deal with issues in the moment in which they are happening instead of using vices, and you numb the issues, and then the issues continue like piling up until you could even eventually having a mental breakdown. Any questions before we go? At any point, if you have a question, feel free to just ask.
Okay, we were talking about yourself now.
Working?
Okay. Now we're not talking about your space. So we're talking about a tidy space. My husband loves a tidy space, and he forgets that we have 2 toddlers. So every time he comes, he'll be like, and then I just leave him. Really, He'll clean the house and in 2 seconds, it's the same, right? So,
Yeah, that being said though, there is some good significant research which does show that like having a tidy space is really good for your mental wellness. So it's a good thing. I know it's like in some cases when you have small kids and stuff like that, you also have to be realistic about your expectations. But this is just one of an example of like how being intentional about curating your space, your environment, has a huge impact on your mental wellness. The next one. Oh,
yeah, aromatherapy. You can, this is the use of essence, not essence, like natural oils and essential oils and everything. We do this, and it's really good, even with the babies when they are too energetic. We just use lavender. Yes, it's confirming that. So it really helps with your mental wellness as well. And also, I'll talk about music, uplifting music. I love music. Every time, do you want to talk about?
yeah, sorry to interrupt you before you go to music. Zoli, your earlier question where you're talking about like having trouble with sleeping. That's another thing which we find also to help. There are certain essential oils that when we put in, it just like calms us down and helps us to get to sleep.
Yeah, music, uplifting music. When I'm like when it's gloomy, when I feel gloomy, these the type of music that I can play like classical music. It calms your nerves down, and you feel good, right? And people listen to different types of music that uplifts them when they're feeling down, and this really helps you with your mental wellness as well.
And note that we say uplifting music because not all music is uplifting, right? Like if you're trying to sleep, I don't think rock music would help you to sleep. And we when we go back to like we're saying that go back to the Bible. There's a story of a king who had troubled thoughts. His name was Saul, and anytime he was in a state where he's in a rage, he's having troubled thoughts, they would call David, who played sacred music. He used to play a harp, and anytime he played the harp, the king would be calmed down. And I think there's a lot for us to learn from the use of uplifting music and calming our minds. Head up to you when you're still talking about music.
No, we get.
Okay, okay. So the other thing about mental wellness is you also, in addition to doing all these things, some other root causes of a lack of mental wellness, a lack of like proper mental health is like sometimes the things are happening on a biochemical level in your brain. And I think especially with men, sometimes we have a hard time with reaching out for help when we're not doing well very mentally. And we put it here very intentionally that it's really important to get help. And one of the reasons why it's important to get help is like then you know what you're dealing with. If you're dealing with something which doesn't have a name to it, you don't know what you're really dealing with. So that's why it's important, if you've been doing all the things that we've been mentioning, the self-care things within yourself, within your environment, and you're still not reaching the maximum potential of mental wellness, it's important to visit a naturopathic doctor, visit a medical doctor, maybe if they refer you to psych or a psychologist or a counselor or whatever professional help there is, it's important to get it. It's important to reach out for help. And I think over the years we've really improved in destigmatizing mental health and reaching out for help. And I think we're in a good space in history, unlike maybe 20, 30 years ago when people would hide about these things. So yeah, you always wanna get help when you need it. Don't be shy to look for help. Then the last thing that we're going to talk about is like the strangest secret about maximizing your mental wellness. Well, what thinks you know what is the strangest secret about maximizing your mental wellness? Any thoughts?
Prayer.
Yeah. Have another one over there? Prayer. Okay, awesome. I'm liking this. What's another one?
Faith.
Faith. Uh-huh.
Trust in God.
Trust. Uh-huh.
Open air exercise is the best because when your brain is oxygenated and you
Uh-huh.
have all this water and all this nice music, there's just something about sunshine,
Uh-huh.
fresh air
Uh-huh.
that really helps you metabolize and catabolize whatever's going on in your system.
Awesome. We're taking all the answers. Open air, prayer, faith, trust. Another one? Love. Okay. Awesome. All right. We'll keep the answers in your mind. We're gonna go into the strangest secret, and it's very strange because it's strange. So this is actually the strangest secret. It's strange because it's not really a secret if you really think about it, but it's a secret because like majority of people that will actually practice it in a very practical way in their day-to-day life. And it's based upon a principle from Proverbs 23 verse 7 in the Bible, which says, "As a man thinks in his heart, so is he." In another way, we are the sum of our thoughts. I want us to just like sit with that and think about what that really means. Feel free to.
Sure.
Yeah, I talk a lot, so. So being the Bible says what we really are is like what we think, and we're the sum of our thoughts. And so if that's the case, it makes a lot of sense that like if you want to achieve the maximum mental wellness, you just need to focus on what you want and not what you don't want. It sounds very simple, but it's a very strange secret because like I spent quite a significant amount of my life kind of having an intellectual appreciation of it, but not a practical living experience of it. I remember I have a very dear friend of mine. His name is Jack, and we have a community where we've been like kind of like studying these things for over the years. And one of the days I was talking with him, it was in the winter, I think about winter 2021. And I was just telling him, you know what, I just can't wait to go to another country, to go to a sunny country, and I'll be happy. And he's like, oh, why is that so? And I'm like, you know, when I have the sun, when I have, you know, nice weather and everything, I'll be happy. When I have like snow and slush and all this stuff and cold, I'm very unhappy. And he's like, no, it's not the weather, it's you.
And every time I also told him that it was him, and he would get angry. Why would you say it's me? And I was like, you're the one who changes everything. You are the one who has control over your life, your thoughts, what you're thinking. So if you let something control you, that means every winter you'll be like Thomas, miserable, right? You'll be unhappy, and everything that you're saying, you're just cranky in a way. You're not. But I love that he started focusing on what he wanted, and then that's really changed. This winter was really different as compared to the other winters that I came into his life. They were miserable.
So this is not to negate that, like,
Yeah.
you know, there might be other things happening on a biochemical level. Like, for example, we know that, you know, there's something called seasonal affective disorder. And that's why I'll get very upset with my wife. I'll tell her, teacher, school, that there's something called seasonal affective disorder. I have seasonal affective disorder. Every winter comes and I feel this way. You know, this is science, like we're talking about. But And there are things like when we're talking about the self-care that we should do as a foundation initially, right? Like, taking our vitamin D, especially a lot of people are deficient in vitamin D, especially in the winter months. The other things that you can also do, like we don't have a lot of sunlight during the winter, right? I started also doing light therapy, which helps a lot. It's like this small little light screen which you use, and it mimics. You use it like in the darker hours of the morning, early in the morning when you wake up, let's say you're having breakfast or you're just starting your day, and it kind of helps your body reset the circadian rhythm, and mimics like what the sun would do if it was during the summertime, and that helps. But I was so stuck on just like the chemistry and the science, but there is so much that you can do, and like you can do all the self-care, get all the professional help you need, use all these tools like the vitamin D, the phototherapy, but there is a ceiling that you will eventually hit if you're not like tapping into the stranger's secret, which is like if you're not focusing on what you want. Like all I could see was the snow and the slush and the everything. I could not see all the beauty that comes with the snow. I could not focus on what I really want. I was just focusing on what I don't want. And you actually become what you focus on, right? So eventually, a lifetime of focusing on what you don't want, you actually become what you don't want. And that's why sometimes, let me not go there. I don't want to go on rabbit holes, but it's important to be very intentional on what you focus on, because that's what you become, and you actually manifest what your thoughts are, right? So sometimes there might be a situation where you really don't dislike something, or you're really trying to avoid something, but you find yourself in the same situation you're trying to avoid. Or something you really dislike one of your parents, and when you grow up, you end up like being one of them. Like it's a manifestation of them, because you're focusing so much on them, right? Like focusing on what you don't want, or instead of like what you actually want, the person you actually want to become.
Yeah, so all I can say is you're a product of your thoughts, right? And for example, if you think negatively, you attract negative outcomes. And to maximize your mental wellness, you need to attract the positive, charge those positive thoughts, and negative thoughts, they come, and sometimes it's really not easy to let them go, but you really need to focus on the positive, and this will change your life. So, I wanted to talk about myself, and I was focusing on the negative a lot. Do you remember? I would just listen to one song every day and cry a lot. Okay, when I send my kids to some wrong.
Oh yeah. No.
So I would just focus on I would just wake up not doing anything, crying, listening to one song, and it was miserable. And then Thomas then told me that you are what you think. You need to focus on the positive. Why we send the kids there? And then it started coming up, and I started focusing on the positive, and it worked out. And honestly, these things really work. What we focus on is what we become. And when we focus on the negative, we become that.
Yeah, so what she's referring to, I remember now, our kids were away from us for about a couple months, and which was, in as much as we missed them, there was a lot of good that happened during those 2 months. We learned a lot about each other. We had stopped growing in our relationship, in knowing each other. We were able to take a trip together, which we would not have been able to do if the kids were still there on vacation. And during that time, we were like, we found ourselves getting closer back again. And there was so much good that was happening, but like while she was just focused on like, oh, the kids are not there, she was missing all the good that was happening in our relationship, the things that were redoing again that we had forgot about doing with the pressure of the kids and everything.
Hi, can I make a comment
Sure.
about all that? So, gratitude journaling is something that I always tell patients to do, and especially back to the question about sleep, doing that before bed, getting your mind on those positive thoughts before you go to sleep will help you not go to the negative as much. So those racing thoughts of the worries and cares. So
Absolutely.
that's another option.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. That's really amazing. And so yeah, we're gonna go to the next one. So pretty much the principle on all of this I was saying, there's a principle in 2 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 18 which could be summed up as saying that by beholding you become changed. The things that you behold, you become changed into the image of those things. So the thoughts that you focus on, you become what you focus on. And so if you're the summation of your thoughts, you actually want to focus on the positive. So we're going to talk a little bit about the positive right now. Okay, go ahead.
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. So there's a verse in the Bible, which is Philippians 4 verse 8, which talks about where our focus should be. And so it says, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are commendable, whatsoever things are admirable, focus on these things. Want to say something, please?
Okay. So I'll just take some part of the verse, like whatever is true. For me, growing up, I would feel like I think I'm worthless, or and you would just tell yourself that growing up, and you don't see yourself succeeding. You just think you're there to clap hands for other people. And when I learned about these things, I was like, oh. I then remember Psalm 139:14 that says, I'm fearfully and wonderfully made. So every time you tell yourself you're worthless, you have to stop. Is that true? You have to ask yourself, is that true? And then what's true is you're fearfully and wonderfully made. That's why the verse will be like, whatever is true, focus on those things.
Yeah, a lot of times, like, our brains are very complex, it's a very complex organ. Sometimes we can create stories which are not very real. They have even done studies where an event happens, and then later on when people reframe the event, like they're reframing, sometimes it's not even very accurate to like what actually happened. And so the brain can be can play games with you. But it's important to like go back to like, okay, these thoughts that I'm having, these thoughts of self-depreciation, of like I'm an unworthy person, are they actually true, right? And so when you focus on what's true, this is like really good for mental wellness. I can move on? Okay, so the other thing is love, things that are lovely. And love. So I wanted to just like highlight this principle which is in the Bible, which talks about love your neighbor just like you love yourself. And I think a lot of times that I have came across this principle, I have thought about it in the context of like, I should be loving the other people around me, right? That makes a lot of sense. But there's the other part which I used to miss a lot, the part which says just like you love yourself. And I think the mic has been taken.
Yeah, and and when it comes to this second part, like love yourself, it simply means that you cannot love your neighbor when you can't love yourself. You cannot give what you don't have. You need to love yourself first so that you'll be able to love the person next to you, your neighbor, your relative, and everyone.
Yeah, and I didn't realize for a long time that I actually had some self-hate thoughts towards myself. And how it would end up manifesting is that I had some addictions I struggled with in the past, and what happened is when you having an addiction that you're struggling with, and you hate yourself, you're never gonna overcome that addiction until you start loving yourself. Because what happens is you get back to that vice, you fall into that temptation, you tell yourself I'm such a bad person, I'm such an awful person, but you think that like staying in that mental state is gonna motivate you next time not to do it, but it really doesn't work like that. When you start with appreciating who God has created you to be, the fact that like in your current state where you feel you're so unworthy, God still saw it fit to come and die for you on the cross, and He loves you that much with all the baggage and everything that you have, and really just starting to appreciate that I must be worth something for God to put all His resources of heaven to come towards me and pour them and invest them into me. That is actually what can help you. That can help you get out of vices and addictive patterns.
And another way is you need to see yourself through God's eyes. Like, how does God see you? You're created in His image, right? Genesis 1:27 tells us that. And also another thing is you're chosen and you're loved. Ephesians 1:4. That's all I want.
Thank you so much. And then going back to gratitude, I like Sasha what you mentioned about gratitude. Another principle in the Bible is about, it says that in everything give thanks. And so I highlighted everything because sometimes like it feels like there's nothing to give thanks about. Like this situation is just like so messed up, and you think there's nothing to give thanks about the situation, but it's more so of a state of mind where there's another verse which says all things work together for good to those who love God. So it's a state of mind where in the moment you might not see how things are working together for good. You might not see why there's a reason to give thanks, but if you're always in a state of gratitude, then things will always work out together. They always say like hindsight is 20/20. It's always like sometimes when you look backwards and you realize, oh, that's why that happened. If this hadn't happened, then I would not be where I needed to be. And so even when you don't see the reason why or the mechanism, or you don't understand how things are working, you always need to be in a state of gratitude and a state of giving thanks.
Just something, and sometimes it's not the big things.
Yeah.
You should be thankful for. Just like an exercise in the morning, saying 10 things that you're grateful. Literally, like I'm grateful for the bed I'm sleeping on, the chair. Just that developing that mindset actually changes the chemistry that happens in our body, and you start to feel the benefit of that. So it's not about the big things either.
Yeah.
It could just be the smallest mundane thing that help us then appreciate the bigger things.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, even life itself. Sometimes we even forget to say thank you for the life itself, because we wait until maybe I have a Cybertruck to be thankful. Like, oh, I'm really grateful. Look, I got a Cybertruck. But we forget that life, living, being able to breathe, we need to be thankful for that. You had your hand up.
Just to piggyback on Brother Lane's point there, I wanted to share a really quick experience I had regarding that exactly. A couple of years ago, quite a few years back, I was having one of those days where nothing was enough. The money I was making wasn't enough. The car I was driving wasn't good enough. I wanted a bigger house, and I was driving to Home Depot with these thoughts, and I usually talk to God a lot when I'm driving. And I was arguing with God in my thoughts. Why can't I have more? Why can't I have a better job where I'm happier? Why can't I drive a nicer car that doesn't break down every other week? Right? And I was just unhappy with everything in my life. And as I walked through Home Depot, I had these very same thoughts, and I was talking to God back and forth. Why do you love others more than me type thing. And the person who helped me in Home Depot was in a wheelchair, and he had no legs. And I asked him for the part, and the moment when I saw him, he was a very jolly guy, very happy. And I felt so bad immediately. I felt like the worst person on the planet. And he guided me to the thing that I was looking for, which I can't remember now. And he said, it's up there. Can you get it? I can't reach. And I was like, this one, it goes to the left. And I had to like feel it out and take it down. You ever pray a Thanksgiving prayer for having legs? When I got back to the car, I did.
Yeah.
You know, and all these thoughts flooded me that there's a saying that rings very true that says, health is a crown that the healthy wear, but only the sick can see. Right? So I was like, you know, just a week before, some youth from the Orangeville church invited me to play soccer. They're not going to invite him. You know, how does he get anything done at home from a higher shelf? Does he go to the bathroom properly by himself? Like, all these thoughts came flooded. And I just felt so bad, you know, to complain about these trivial, foolish things. You know, so I guess the point is that even if you think you have nothing to be thankful for, because you got a mountain of problems and the bills are this high, but the money is this low.
Yeah.
The fact that you're bleeding every day and you got 2 legs to walk on and you can run after your kids, that's a blessing that most people desire to have.
Oh yeah, definitely. Thank you, Zoli and Elaine, for bringing those points. They did a study and they found that in general, 70% of human thought is negative thought on a regular day. And so that's why it's super important to like keep gratitude in the small things, because when you're really doing that, just like what Elaine mentioned, is like you're creating new brain pathways where eventually, with a lot of practice in doing this, your default becomes, you know, thinking positive, which piggybacks in what Chris said earlier on in the day for those who were present for our presentation, where she was talking about like how God wants to renew our minds. And what renewing a mind, basically when you go to the neurochemical, biochemical nitty-gritty parts of it, is literally just new pathways being created. And so that's why it's super important. Love, you want to say something? Should I go ahead?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. And so one of my friends and mentors, his name is Alex, he says something that stuck with me forever. He say that happiness is not having what you want. It's actually wanting what you have. It's very deep. And when you think that happiness is having what you want, what you're actually creating as is what's called conditional happiness, right? Where you're only happy when you have something, when the conditions that you have set in your mind are there. But what usually happens is like, you know, when you're like, oh, I'm gonna be happy when I'm making 100K, or I have a new couch, I have a whatever, you name it. Once you hit 100K, you now have a new milestone. You think you're gonna be happy at 100K, but you're now playing with friends who make 200K. And so you now feel inferior to your friends, and now you have a new goal. So you always have conditional happiness. But when you want what you have, you can be happy all the time. Forgiveness. Yeah. I can go ahead? Okay, sounds good. So another, in the focusing on the positive, another aspect about focusing on the positive, we all know, like, you know, life is not like a utopia. People step on your toes, people do things that you don't like, and stuff like that. It's super important to also be in a mental state of being willing to forgive people when they step on your toes, when they wrong you, because you know, we're the summation of our thoughts. If you're harboring grudges, if you're harboring hatred in your heart, if you're harboring all of these negative things, in as much as it's hard to forgive, it's actually for your benefit. They say like not forgiving is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. So we really wanted to highlight that when I speak about contentment. Okay, alright. On social media, okay, sounds good. And it's also important to be content in the Bible, it talks about like how contentment is a good thing. Contentment is being satisfied. It's a little bit different from gratitude, but when you want what you have, you're satisfied, you're in that state of being, it also helps you to become a more grateful person. So it's kind of like a cycle. If you're grateful, you become content. The more content you are, the more grateful you become. So I'll let my love over here speak on the next point.
Yeah, social media. They it can be positive and negative. There's a downside to social media. We all have. Some of us we have Facebook. Like I used to watch reels like for the rest of the day and not doing anything. And what it does is you compare yourself to someone. And then you'll be like, these people, what are they doing that we're not doing? Look at the houses they're living in, the cars they're driving. And sometimes these people they just go to a car sale, rent a car, just come for content, right? Content creation, and you're there watching. Your day is gone and you're wasting your time. And then mentally, you're so, you get into a depression. You'll be like, what am I doing wrong and everything? This honestly has really created negative impact on our lives, on our day-to-day lives. And it also promotes negativity. Like, you see, when you post a video, those people who comment. If you go to the comment section, they destroy people. And they are always negative. You don't see a positive comment there. They'll be like, why are you doing that? There's nothing positive on social media. So it promotes, okay,
yeah, majority of the time.
Okay, majority of the time. Majority of the time, there's a small positivity there. Is it okay if I say that?
Yeah, and I think I like what you mentioned because I think one of the things that social media does is subconsciously you can start comparing yourself with what you're seeing, and a lot of it is actually artificial. People like only post a small version of what they want people to see, but that's what I was reading. There's another book I was reading where it was saying that back in the, I forgot, it was alluding to like in the US, the statistics from the US, but they were just saying that when people were almost all making the same amount of money back in the, I forgot, it was saying, I guess in the 40s or 60s or whatever, and they didn't have access to see differences in their pay, people were generally happy, right? But when eventually they started having access to seeing how, at that time, someone could be making more money than you, but there's no like physical assets or flashy things for you to know that they are making more money than you, except if you had access to their bank account. People are generally happy. Once people notice that there's a difference in my life as compared to that life, all of a sudden, I don't know what happens, it's just a human thing, your happiness just drops down. And that's the thing about social media, is like there's a subconscious aspect of like when you're seeing all these things are artificial things, you tend to compare yourself to those things, and then because it's like living up with the Jones, right? Anytime you see someone has a nicer truck than you or a greener lawn than you, all of a sudden, like you're no more satisfied with your own lawn, or no more satisfied with your own garden, right, or your own flower bed. Before seeing the neighbors, you were satisfied, and so those are some of the dangers of.
And actually, about the lawn, some of them will be spraying their lawn to look greener, and you don't know about that, and you're not happy about yours that's natural. And some are even planting plastic flowers. That's why they are beautiful. And that's the other thing that we don't see when we watch these things. And we are in our homes so depressed because you say life is not working out, but actually life is working out.
And so to sum it up all, you can think of like maximizing mental wellness in like this triangle, where the first level is you want to make sure your self-care is in, right? You can get all the professional help you can, but without that solid foundation of self-care, it is not gonna go a long way. In addition to the self-care, you wanna get help so that if you have any mental health condition which needs to be diagnosed, you're well aware of what it is. But even with any recommendations you can get from professional help, it's very interesting when I'm when I'm at the jail. Someone comes in and they're asking for their medications to be increased, and the doctor's like, okay, we'll increase them to this amount, and then we can see you in 2 weeks and see how they are doing. And the person is like, oh, okay, so when I see you in 2 weeks, what are you going to increase it to? So they have already made up in their mind that whatever increase is happening on that day is not going to work. They'll have to increase to a bigger dose, right? And so they've already made up in their mind. It's a mindset, right? As a man thinks that in his heart, so is he. If you don't, you can get all the professional help you can have, but if you don't have the strange secret that we're talking about, there's always a ceiling in maximizing your mental wellness. And I think that's about it, right? Yeah. Awesome. Any questions? Any thoughts, comments, or anything? We wrap it up. Awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good day.